So go ahead and open up your chat box. It's just me today. No Taisha, no Gabby. So I need your company in the chat box to tell me some of the things that we're going to be talking about, and so that I can hear your questions and guide the conversation a little bit. I'll do my best to give lots of examples and best practices that I've seen, but I also want to know what your questions are and what your successes have been and what your challenges are in creating a culture of team care. So today is like my favorite thing. I don't call it a deep dive, it's more of a medium dive into the central nervous system and stress management. So we get to talk about some of the brain science behind that, as well as some actionable solutions that you can take starting today in your office, no matter where you are or with whom you are working. So what I want to start with doing is make sure everybody downloaded the personal stress prescription. That's at nonprofitcomfort.com/consulting, which is in the chat box. Hopefully you can see that. Let me go ahead and re-chat the things that I put up there. And so far, no one has chatted their personal stress prescription, which just basically means like, what do you do to cure your stress? That's it. It can be anything. There's no wrong answers. So, all right, download the personal stress prescription. I'm going to share my screen by way of introduction for those of you who haven't participated in Comfort Tuesdays. I told you I'd tell you a little bit more about me every time using different stories. And I didn't prep a slide, but I will tell you that in 2003, let's see, yes, it was the year my son was born, I went through yoga teacher training, and I never became a yoga teacher. But I did the Anusara style of yoga teacher training here in Tacoma Park, Maryland at Willow Street. And I'm still very much a huge fan of yoga, and I have taught kids yoga, which is a whole different animal. But today, as one of our breaks, we're going to do 7 spinal stretches, because I think the spine is the central energy channel of our body, and the better you can learn to treat it, the better off you will be and your health will be. So not yet, because we haven't started yet, although if you want to get up and go ahead and do a stretch break, go ahead. But we will get started with some of the personal stress prescriptions and brain science stuff. And I'll go ahead and keep my camera on so that you can see me. I put some of this together last night, so I can't even remember what I put in here. And since it's just me, I didn't have to come up with a script. So none of us really know what's going to come out today, which is great. So I want to start with this poem. Go ahead and read it. So this is by Lynn Ungar, and I posted this actually 3 years ago on my social media feed, and it came up today, and I thought, wow, 3 years ago we thought things were bad, but it's gotten worse. And I think with all of the burning that's happening literally in the Amazon and in Australia, and with so many reasons for despair and so many reasons to be angry, this work is more important than ever. And it's not just how we take care of ourselves, it's how we take care of each other in teams. So that's why this personal stress prescription, if you're watching this on record, that's the permanent link home, nonprofitcomfort.com/links. But you can find it today either at consulting or links. So this is what we're going to talk about today, and I encourage you to fill it out while we talk with additional attention on the how often or by when column. I'm going to ask you, or challenge you, I should say, by the end of this half hour together, I want you to identify the thing that you're going to do today, the thing you're going to do this week, and the thing you're going to do in February. And if you missed Gabby's and my webinar on habit change, let's see, it was 2 weeks ago now, it is up on YouTube and recorded, and you can check out that with your team or by yourself to talk a little bit more about habit change. So this is the worksheet that we're going to be working with today. So what I want to talk about is that 100% of us experience stress. Some of us, many of us, experience anxiety or depression that is on the range of human emotions. And 15% of us, in the US at least, are diagnosed with anxiety or depression. And that's a different animal, right? Because then that might encourage or require therapeutic or medicine pharmaceutical solutions. But what we're going to talk about in this webinar, and many of the things that you can do at your workplace, are stress solutions that are non-medical. They are therapeutic, but in a natural kind of way. And they're very social. And part of our sort of learning around the nervous system here is why social matters. And that's where the kind of neuroscience of the first part of this presentation goes. So here's an embarrassing picture. Well, it's not embarrassing. It's just women in midwinter plunging into the cold Potomac, which is what I did on Saturday this past week. So my point is that team care works better than self-care. There's no way I would have been doing this if I were not part of this Mama Bears team fighting climate change with the Chesapeake Climate Action Network. But that's not the only way, plunging into the Potomac, that we could take care of each other. But since I mentioned it in my newsletter, I wanted to make sure some of you knew that I actually did follow through. But also as individuals, and I would argue as individuals in the helping sectors, right? Teaching, nonprofit work, service work, we're really good at taking care of other people, but we're pretty terrible as a sector at self-care. And I mentioned a few weeks ago reading The Four Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. This book right here gave me a lot of insight into why some of us are so bad at taking care of ourselves, because many of us are obligers, which means we are good at external expectations and fulfilling those, but we're not so great at internal expectations. And so we need systems of accountability to make sure that we achieve our self goals or our self-driven goals. So moving on, wanted to talk about cortisol. So cortisol is a stress hormone. It's naturally released by our body, and it's trackable in saliva, which means you don't have to draw blood, which means you don't need the complicated protocols to do studies around stress, which is why cortisol has been studied quite a bit. And so we know that cortisol is a tricky hormone, because if it's chronically raised, then you're almost very certain to have health problems later in life. If it's chronically depressed, you are also correlated with health problems later in life. But if you can learn to regulate your cortisol, if your cortisol can go up and down, sort of the way nature intended, which stress, the fight or flight mode of our central nervous system, is meant to protect us. If we can regulate our nervous system, we are going to have fewer health problems. And so we'll talk a little bit more about why that is today. So this is with a giant hat tip to Dr. Joe Dispenza, a New York Times bestselling author, who talks about the 3 different types of stress. And so this is the first type of stress, which is physical. So this is literally physical things that happen to your body. Muscle exhaustion from whatever reason, overuse, sleep deprivation, which is a form of torture, any injury caused by an accident or chronic illness, right? The balance for that might be physical remedies like cardio, engaging that, thyroid, or yoga, going upside down, massage, getting palpated, weight lifting, chiropractor treatment, rest, just getting some rest. That is like the free solution that none of us are taking advantage of for some reason. Acupuncture or acupressure, body work. So these are physical stressors, physical solutions. Now, chemical stressors include things that invade our body and mess up our body chemistry. So that could be sickness, illness, virus or bacteria bound. It could be allergies or some sort of exposure to an allergenic or toxic trigger, even hangovers from the toxins in your system, or immunosuppression, which a lot of folks are facing. Balance, of course, for chemical challenges is different vitamins and nutraceuticals in your food or in your supplements, and then of course different medicines or enzymes that you might take. But what's so interesting about these different kinds of stress, emotional stress is said to cause 70 to 80% of our health problems. Think about that, 70 to 80% of all health problems, not mental health, all health. And this is the kind of stress that many of us feel silently, and that many solutions don't work equally for all of us. So emotional stress, we're talking about trauma, fear, financial stress, family stress, shame, which Brene Brown is brilliant at her analysis and research. So moving on, what did I put next? Oh yeah, great, my favorite part. So many of you have heard of polyvagal theory, and this ladder is a great visual for thinking about the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system and how they interact and where we want to be. So basically, we want to stay at the top of our ladder, the green part of our safe and social nervous system, as much as possible. We want to, oh, somebody said the link is broken. Thanks for sharing the download link. I'm not sure why that's broken. Nonprofitcomfort.com. It should be like, oh, you know what? It's broken because I typed and at the end and the space didn't come through. Try that. Links or consulting. Anyway, we want to stay in this green part of our safe and social nervous system as much as possible because that's where learning happens. It's fight or flight is the natural autonomic, which means automatic nervous system response to any threat. It could be an emotional threat. It could be a physical threat, like someone cutting you off in traffic, an emotional threat, like a trigger of a certain person or a certain type of person that really sets you into a stress mode. And because of the way our brain and nervous system react in fight or flight, we can't actually learn or plan when we are in this autonomic state. That is our sympathetic nervous system. It keeps us alive when we are faced with life-threatening circumstances. We can either run away from it or fight it. And unfortunately, in this day and age, we face fewer physical threats to our life and more sort of emotional slights and threats that we have fewer tools to deal with. And that is where our work becomes, because we need to get from yellow to green, from the middle of the ladder to the top of the ladder when that happens, and recognizing when that happens and how to get up there. Now, freeze is the red part. That is literally you're frozen. It could be physically frozen. It also could be psychological freezing, numbness, depression. No learning can happen here either. And that is part of the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the polyvagal part. It's just the dorsal vagal nerve, whereas the safe and social part of our parasympathetic nervous system, which is the ventral vagal nerve, is where we want to be. And interestingly enough, the vagus nerve, which means wandering nerve, and it's been studied a lot in the last few years, that's what encourages our social behavior with others, which is a soothing state, or brings us oxytocin and soothing states to our central nervous system. So the social piece is actually really important. So these are some stress relief practices. I keep putting these little boxes up on the screen because I love them. They are all in and of themselves sort of free or cheap. I mean, you can spend money on anything, but solutions to regulating and calming our central nervous system. And like I said, like Taisha and I talked about last week, one person's play is another person's torture. So you really can't get too attached to your thing as if it's everybody's thing. I'm not even sure. I don't think I put yoga even up on here. And I'm very aware that like yoga is not everybody's thing. But speaking of yoga, let's take a break. And then we will talk a little bit more about this personal stress prescription. And let's see if I stop sharing. I'm gonna make sure, did the link work? It looks like Gretchen, the link worked. So everybody get up. We're gonna do our spine. We're gonna stretch our spine in 7 directions. And this is, you can do this from your chair actually too, if you prefer, but to get your blood pumping, I encourage you to stand up. So the direction we do not need to stretch our spine is down, because gravity does that for us all day long and we are very compressed. So to start off, we're going to stretch up. So stretch your spine up as you breathe in, and breathe out, but keep your arms out, stretching up. And now breathe in again and really stretch up, showing your belly button. And you might even go into the next 2 directions, which is stretching the sides of your spine. So these are directions 2 and 3. And this is how many yoga classes start out, because let's face it, the sides of our spine are very important and yet neglected. So now we're going to stretch the back of our spine, which means going forward. So you can actually lean against a table or a top of a chair. And the important part here is you're getting some stretch in your lower back and in your hamstrings. You don't have to touch the floor, but you can. You don't have to touch your knees or your shins, but you can. I'm getting a good enough stretch here, just pressing my hips up and feeling that stretch in the hamstrings, but that also gives you a stretch here on the back of your spine. So that gets actually a lot of stretch in our day-to-day. So the important thing to stretch is actually the front of our spine or going backwards. So you can reach back for a wall if you want, or you can just reach back, or you can put your hands on your lower back and press here. But this is going to open up your chest, open up your heart region, stretch the front of your spine. And that's directions 4 and 5. But I said there were 7. What possibly could be left? See, I hate webinars because it's not interactive because you all, I can't see, but you can see me. Oh, gee, it looks like I'm frozen. Hopefully you can still see me. Anyway, you're going to twist. And so to protect your back, you're going to bend your knees. And you're going to twist in both directions, or you can just hold on to the back of your chair and twist this way, and then hold on to the back of your chair and twist the other way. So that is a really good one. You can usually hear some snap, crackles, and pops in there, but that is directions 6 and 7 for your 7 spinal direction stretch. So remember, Sushumna, central energy channel of your body. You want to make sure that you are keeping that energy flowing, and therefore stretching out all the directions of your spine is a good idea. So now we will go back to, oh, wait. Before we get into specific, I'm going to talk about 7 social stress prescriptions today. But I want you to just take like 10 seconds, jot some more down on your personal stress prescription, and pay attention, especially that thing you said you were going to do today, or that I asked you to say you were going to do today. Focus on that for a second. When are you going to make that happen today? It's already noon. Well, it's like 12:18 on the East Coast. When are you going to make that happen? Go ahead and do it now. Make a plan. Dan Pink says, treat breaks like meetings. You wouldn't miss meetings with other people, so don't skirt or don't miss meetings with yourself. Great. So we're going to talk about 7 social stress solutions, and not just the brain science behind them, but actually what you can do to encourage them in your office. And here's where I encourage you to stay on the chat box and tell us how you encourage laughter in your office. So while you're chatting that in, because this is like a tricky thing at work, you don't want to make it too funny, because then people will goof off and they won't work as no, there's no such thing as too funny, really. And we want to encourage laughter in the workplace, but sometimes it doesn't really happen naturally. So we have to sort of spur it. So I'm going to write in the chat box, how do you encourage laughter? So here's why laughter is important. 1, it strengthens your immunity and your core because you literally engage your core muscles. Biochemically, it creates endorphins, which lower cortisol. Remember cortisol, the stress hormone? Well, endorphins, which is a natural pain reliever, it comes from the word endo and morphine because it's internally created and it's a painkiller like morphine. So the tricky part is even when you're faking, it works. So laughter, even when you're like, ha, 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 fake, right? Your body thinks that's real and creates some endorphins. Same thing was when you smile. So in the case of smiling and laughing, faking it till you make it is actually really good advice. And medical studies have shown that endorphins are proven to block physical pain and also ward off anxiety and depression. So there's some science for you. Okay, sending gifts with my emails, fantastic. These are some ways that you all are encouraging laughter in your office. My boss and I love trading bad puns, especially the ones that her 5-year-old comes up with. Yes, children are fantastic at puns, aren't they? And then there's some siloed atmospheres, which means like they have different spaces with loudness and quietness in their office, but they can experience both the quiet and the loudness in their two sort of siloed office areas. That's good. More laughter on the loud side, I guess. So I want to give you some things that you can do with your team that will help you talk about laughter and therefore laugh and therefore encourage more office systems for laughter. The point of this webinar is office systems for stress solutions. So I want to give you as many ideas as possible. So sometimes when we use GIFs in the office chat app, that's cool. Thanks for chatting these in, folks. So sometimes when I'm in person doing this training, I make folks pair up, and I recommend you do this with your team. I make them pair up, and for like 1 minute, which isn't much time, really 2 minutes helps more. They go back and forth and name the specific thing that makes them laugh, and they make a list while they go. And it's surprisingly difficult to come up with things that make you laugh like on demand. In fact, I encourage you to start jotting down right now things that make you laugh. Feel free to put them in the chat box. These are great office solutions. Somebody else chatted in silly icebreakers at meetings. I'm a big fan of icebreakers. There's a whole, if you go down to the bottom of my nonprofit comfort website, there's a tab called icebreakers, and I have like 8 of them that don't suck. I opened a meeting with a Thwaites exercise from the last webinar. It was hilarious watching each of her trying to do it. Oh my gosh, Becky, you're my favorite person today. Thank you. For those of you that missed the Thwaites exercise, you just hold up a thumb. Am I still on camera? Yeah, and a pointer finger, and then you switch. I'm good at it because I've been practicing, but it's kind of hard when you first try. Okay, so that's one exercise you can do with your team. Literally, you set a timer and you name funny things, and then you debrief with the group. So everybody reports back a few funny things from their group, and inevitably there's conversations. What Instagram account is that? What do you mean you have a dog? I didn't know you had a niece. Give me that. You have to send me that gift. Let's put that on Slack, etc. So office systems can come up from that. But the point is, encourage laughter, encourage jokesters. Even dad jokes are great. You want to figure out who the funny person is at your office and like prop them up and encourage them to continue being funny. In this time, I've been watching lately, I don't know why. Oh, because I watched Tina Fey's Mark Twain Award acceptance speech at the Kennedy Center. And I've been watching them in succession because they really are the amazing people of American comedy. And Whoopi Goldberg said in the one I watched yesterday that in these times, and this was years ago, we have to retain our sanity by laughing. We have to tap into the core of what makes us human, and laughter is one of those pieces. Okay, but we have more to talk about, and it's already 12:24, so let me keep going. Wait, anything else on laughter? No, just keep laughing and encouraging laughter in your office. So this is one of my favorites too. I'll try and keep this short. Spirituality and gratitude. This is a different kind of brain science in that when you practice, especially with any kind of physical pose, if you practice a spiritual or gratitude practice, your body's going to learn that and invoke a relaxation response when you engage that practice again. So it could be a religious practice, like a spiritual community where you have a particular mudra, which is a hand gesture, or a particular prayer, or a particular song, or a particular environment, or a particular time of day. Yesterday, I was in the city and heard a call to prayer at a mosque. There are many cues that we can practice that invoke a relaxation response in our body, but you can't just like have an emergency crisis in your life and decide to become a gratitude practitioner or a Christian or a Muslim or a meditator, right? These are things you have to build up before the crisis hits. So I really encourage people to have a spiritual, I'm not a religious person, but I encourage people to have a gratitude practice, have a spiritual practice, whatever that looks like, because your central nervous system needs it. There's a reason people are attracted to these communities where their values are shared and where their practices can be continued. And then finally, gratitude and spirituality really rewire our brain's negativity bias. This is something that, again, with fight or flight, it keeps us alive to remember the negative things that were poisonous or the areas where the predators hunted. But it means that we remember, what's the Rick Hansen quote? Our brain is like Velcro for negative thoughts and Teflon for positive ones. So we are hardwired to be negative, whereas noticing the positive, noticing what you're grateful for, and usually being part of a spiritual practice rewires that negativity bias. So go gratitude. Oh, and I forgot things that you can do with your group. People are reluctant to talk about spirituality at work. I understand that. But if it's a situation where you can share personal experiences, and if you don't want to be focused on one religion, you can talk about gratitude and spirituality together, which invites people into the conversation a lot more. But in my practices and trainings, I usually ask people to take a solo minute, an individual minute, and talk about the things that are jot the things that they're grateful for that day, very specific things. I also ask people to share in pairs or groups, small groups of 3, what their spiritual practice was growing up. That sometimes is an easier way into the conversation because it's not asking what your spiritual practice is today. It's about growing up, which is what Krista Tippett asks in her Remarkable on Being series on NPR and podcast. But that is a way that you can really go deep pretty quickly. And since my theory of change is that building trust happens when folks make themselves a little vulnerable, inspiring empathy from their colleagues then inspires trust. And this is a great way to go really deep with people quickly without, hopefully in a safe space, without making people feel ostracized in any way for their religious practice. So those are some ideas of how you can bring that into the workplace. And then also if there are differences of spiritual practice that you can use as teaching moments, like Ramadan or high holidays in Judaism, or festivals of light, or other ways that you can ask folks in your office to highlight their traditions. It's more of an invitation for inclusivity and responsiveness to any cultural cues, more than it is asking the minority to teach the majority about their experience. I find that with religious holidays and celebrations, it's a little bit more connected to values and purpose and celebration, so it's a little less triggering. Okay. Oh, wow. Yeah, I could talk about this forever. I'm only going to make one point about this. If you're not convinced that exercise or dance is sort of the key to your longevity in life, then spend a little time down that rabbit hole on Google. Because in addition to combating mild depression, it seems that all of the exercise research we've done over the last 2 decades basically shows that exercise is the cure for everything. So if you're not convinced of that, please do be. But what I want you to be convinced of today is the social element of exercise, which is really where so many of our programs should be focused. It has been shown through research that when you exercise with someone else, you actually show up. So there's accountability. You go longer, the duration, you go harder, right? The intensity, and you have more fun. Show up, go longer, go harder, have more fun. Like, those are all really desirable things, and they're proven in research. And yet we're not building every single exercise program around the social element of exercise. So lots of ideas here of what you can do at your office, including, I'm like showing off my bookshelf today. Beth Cantor's excellent Happy Healthy Nonprofit is full of great physical health options for your office. Walking meetings, doing 2 bells a day where everybody gets up from their desk and dances or stretches. There's so many ideas of how you can incorporate exercise into the social fabric and the team care fabric of your office. And it really stems from your culture. I hate to give a lot of prescriptive things here because it depends on what your inside jokes are, and it depends on what music you all like, and it depends on who the ringleaders are in your office. The great thing about wellness and team care is that anybody can lead it. In fact, you usually have a little bit more effectiveness if you're not like right at the top of the totem pole, especially if you're really into something and you want to share it. You know, the zeal of the newly converted, like when I was again, studying to be a yoga teacher, I had to do sample classes. And so I subject my workers at Environmental Working Group, my colleagues, to sample yoga classes. Thank you, by the way, for indulging me early in the morning. But you probably have people on your team that are willing to lead these kinds of exercise or even dance moments at your office, and you want to take advantage of that. If you don't already have a wellness committee, start one. It's free, and it's a great way to systematize some of these changes. Now, this comes up, and it's my favorite Janet Jackson moment in time. I'm just very 80s nostalgic lately. And we can't like Michael Jackson in the same way anymore. So it's all about Janet. Yes, Tira, thank you for D = dance, this week's self-care activity. I want to take this moment before we talk about alcohol to talk about the Nonprofit Wellness Instagram account, which Tira, who's on this chat screen, has been really great at helping with. We have a cheap wellness A through Z going right now, piggybacking on the previous A through Z that we did around wellness. So check it out. We're only on D, so you're early. And tell us what you think and give us submissions, because we haven't sketched out the whole alphabet yet. So what you tell us could be a letter coming soon. Now, back to the pleasure principle. This is actually a phrase that Freud came up with, but Janet stole it and made it famous with her 80s song. And if you haven't checked out the dancing, go to YouTube and check it out. I lump all the addictive pleasures in this sort of slide. It's screens, right? All the things that we escape with on screen, which is more than ever before, more options than ever before. It's sex and intimacy. So using that as a form of stress relief. And it doesn't have to be sexual, but it's an intimate relationship, right? Again, the social part. And then alcohol, and now pot or other drugs. And local laws vary on this, but basically we encourage a lot of alcohol consumption in our sector. When I did the nonprofit burnout prevention survey in December 2017, it showed like we were really good at happy hours, maybe not better than other sectors, because I think we as humans are really good at this. But the point is, one, this is a form of stress release that people are using. Two, some of these things are not the healthiest things when taken in excess. Three, you want to be inclusive, and therefore, since everybody has different practices, especially around intoxicants, you want to be inclusive of the people in your office who are, for example, not drinkers. When I used to drink, I organized a lot of happy hours. When I stopped drinking, I was really cranky that there were a lot of happy hours. So be inclusive, right? And be healthy, offer alternatives for people. So these things can be healthy. They can be great to go out for drinks with your coworkers, to vent or to problem solve, or even to meet. But some of these things can be addictive or destructive, and you want to be inclusive of everyone in your office. So you have to, I'm not saying don't talk about it at work. It's just that we want to be aware of things of challenges that people are having in these areas, or be aware of triggers that people have. So talking about it actually can, again, encourage empathy and trust. But people have to feel safe in order to share what they're struggling with in these areas. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so a few more stress solutions that you can make social and how to make them happen in your office. So vitamin N, we're going to talk more about trees and forests on February 4th when we do our team care webinar again. But a few points about nature and how you can incorporate it into your office world. One is that it's referred to as vitamin N because it's such an important part of our mental health strategies and practices, and especially now that we have so many screens in our lives. Imagining it and seeing it is okay. What does this mean? It means if you don't have time to go for a hike in Rock Creek Park, here in DC, then looking out the window at nature is better than looking at a wall with no nature. We in DC have a lot of cubicles and have a lot of offices that are not window facing, and even the windows face sometimes a lot of skyscrapers. So if you have, for example, a beautiful poster of nature, or you watch Louis Schwartzberg's amazing time-lapse nature photography, or you take a 5-minute meditation and you imagine a tree or a natural place that's really inspiring or stress relieving to you. Those things actually work on your brain in much the same way that being in nature works on your brain. So again, with Dan Pink's advice of any break is better than no break, even imagining or seeing pictures of nature is better than no nature. So that's one point. Another is walking meetings. Many of you do this already, and I encourage you to continue even in the winter, especially in the winter. This is a practice that you can measure. If you have one of those steppy things, it is something that you can measure on your calendar. I'm going to do one walking meeting a week. It is something you can systematize with one person. My walking meetings with Becky are always going, or my meetings with Becky will always be walking. It is something you can shake things up, especially for the introverts. Walking meetings are great for introverts because then we don't have to look at people directly across a desk or like in the face the whole time. Walking meetings are also great for difficult topics because you don't have to look someone in the face across a desk or in their eyes the whole time. So it jogs loose. Also, moving your body helps you think through what you're saying and be more solution oriented. So walking meetings are really the cure-all to everything. I hope that you'll schedule more on your calendar. And then Shinrin Yoku. I feel like I talk about this all the time, so I'm sorry if you've heard me wax poetic about Shinrin Yoku. It was a word formed in 1982 by the Japanese to describe forest bathing. So not bathing in the forest, but bathing of the forest. Trees emit enzymes, which we then absorb. And more books. The Hidden Life of Trees, which is what the overstory is based on, is all about, all these pictures are falling out. I have pictures as bookmarks. Is all about the powerful reminder of how nature is connected and how we have so much to learn from studying trees and forests. So I believe very strongly that nature is a powerful remedy that we don't take nearly enough advantage of. So if you're lucky enough to be in a place like in Seattle where there's beautiful nature within view of the city, keep looking at it. Here's my awesome toilet guy. And then for this, Taisha looks so diabolical in this picture because she subjected me to the torture chamber. Here's what happened last week in our Take 5 video with the brain breaks around Take 5, which might be limited on YouTube because I guess because I used 30 seconds of Dave Brubeck's song. So hopefully you can actually access that. Somebody will have to let me know. And you can learn more about how to encourage good breaks. We have 3 prescriptions of what you can do to encourage a good break. They are challenge your brain, listen mindfully, and then play, bringing play back into your life, much like you played as a kid. You want to bring play back into your breaks and back into your life as an adult because it's going to work on the right side of your brain like nothing else will. So, oh my gosh, we're at the last one. What could it be? Let's check time, 12:39. I almost got it in under the wire. Oh, and break bingo. I'm sorry this wasn't on the consulting page, but those of you who found it on the links page are smart. This is the break bingo that you're welcome to do and distribute to your team and talk about how you're going to take breaks and how you're going to support taking breaks on your team, because many of the things I hear from people who are reluctant to take breaks is my boss wouldn't understand. So be the kinds of bosses and coworkers who totally understand, get this, and ask questions about it. All right, and this is the last one, which sometimes you can't do at work, but I am not just about being social with humans. I am about being social with mammals mostly. I just can't get into the fish love, lizard love thing, but cats and dogs I'm all about. And I believe, one, yes, all the studies about health of people goes up when they have dogs and cats to take care of. The thing what I like to focus on is the power of touch. These are nuzzlers and cuddlers and purrers. And, those of us without human partners like to cuddle. And so you can do that with cats and dogs, which is awesome. And then unconditional love is the other point, which is dogs and cats give us unconditional love, and we don't practice that with humans, but we do practice it with animals. So let's practice it a little bit more with humans. And remind ourselves that this kind of love that we get and that we give with animals is really beautiful and stress relieving. So thank you, furry ones. Here's a bunch of questions that I'm leaving you with just as like tips, things you can say to your team so that you can get curious about what it is that makes them tick. What is their stress solution? What are they going to do to build a culture where you all take care of each other? So I won't ask you to share because we're out of time, and I promised that you'd be under 40 minutes, but I want you to look at your personal stress prescription and make sure you have something written that you're going to do by the end of the day. We're going to talk about wellness equity, and you go over our stressor scorecard and talk about how circumstances and identity add to our stress before we even get to the office and deal with all of that stress there, and how you can talk about this with your team, and how you can use the stressor scorecard and the ACE scorecard to foment safe discussions around identity, circumstance, and stress. I think that's it. And it has to be because it's 12:42, I'm sorry. But thanks for tuning in today. And thanks for those of you who shared. I'm gonna stop share. And there I am. And thanks for stretching in 7 directions with me. And I hope you bring some of these things back to your team. And if you're watching later from a recording, I hope you stopped and did stretches and talked to your teams. And if not, you can take back the best of what you learned. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. Bye.